Drew here, and I'll just get right to it. I am worried for Kendall in this penultimate episode of Succession Season 3. I'm worried about whether or not the ending was meant to be a literal or symbolic death. I'm worried that, the reason they didn't show him in the teaser for next week's episode is because he's actually dead. But I'm not that worried. I think, this being HBO, they have a way of reaching inside my chest, like the priest does in Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom, and just taking my heart out and letting me see it beating in front of me and then squashing it into dust. They have a way of doing that. So I'm not ruling out the possibility. Some of you have really pointed out really, really obvious foreshadowing of Kendall'S death this season, and there was definitely some very, very obvious foreshadowing this episode. You definitely saw potential things that if he is dead, yes, it was foreshadowed. But I also feel there was a show recently, The White Lotus, that did a bunch of stuff that I feel had to have been intentional foreshadowing of a certain character's death, but it was not an actual physical death that it was foreshadowing, but a spiritual rebirth. It was the death of his old identity. And I feel like there's potential with that for Kendall, because this season he's really, he got out from underneath his father's thumb. He's the only child, he's the only Roy child standing up to his dad. But he has this moment this episode where he's facing down his father.
You've won. Because you're corrupt, and so is the world. I'm better than you. You're, I hate to say this because I love you, but you're kind of evil.
There's this moment where Logan basically reproaches him for the death of the waiter at the end of season 1.
How long was that kid alive before he started sucking in water? A couple of minutes.
And the thing is with this is that this whole season, they've resisted having the kind of plot twists that season 1 had, the kind of shifting fortunes where Kendall gets brought back under Logan's thumb. I think they realized as writers, and I've read interviews where I think they definitely do realize this, that the reversals of fortune in this show, while awesome, can be overdone. So for this season, they didn't want to, have this crazy reversal of fortune where Kendall ends up on the bottom out of nowhere, whereas before we thought he was at the top of the world. Instead, they've had this whole season be his gradual unraveling as thing after thing he thought was going to go his way didn't go his way, and he is losing all sense of power, all sense that he has anything to offer to the world. And he just wants to disappear. And he said he wants to be a ghost. Again, potential foreshadowing. But I think that it's very, very likely that the writers wanted to get him to the bottom again so that once again they could lift him up. But they didn't want to do it in the same way that they've done it in previous seasons. We'll see. I mean, to me, I think that this could just be the death of the Kendall that we know and his rebirth with a new identity as actually, maybe having something that he actually stands for. Because I think this episode he realizes he really could not articulate why he was good and his father was bad. And without some kind of mission statement, why would he oppose Logan? Why is he better than Logan? And some of you have theorized, well, maybe he's not. And, there's a lot of indications that he is his father's son. He's done some pretty bad things. But I think that there is hope for him. And I don't, if I was going to put a percentage on it, I'm 95% sure that he's not dead. I'm not sure why they shot it the way they shot it. It really felt anticlimactic if this was the death of a character. This whole episode was kind of scattershot across the board. I got to the end of the episode. I'm like, is this really the end of the episode? Because it feels like it could just keep going because it's had so many segments that just didn't really feel connected to each other. Otherwise, though, I felt like, even though this episode, I said it was kind of disconnected and scattershot, which makes me think that, this might have just been a scattershot attempt to renew interest in the finale by putting the fate of a character that I think a lot of people, including myself, against our better judgment probably, are deeply invested in, putting him in peril or seemingly in peril. I don't think, because this episode was so scattershot, I feel like if they were actually going to kill Kendall, it would have been a more focused episode and a more cleverly written episode. This wasn't a bad episode by any means. There was a lot of juicy dialogue. There was a lot of interesting moments. It was one of the good episodes of the season. If you think that there have been bad episodes, I think that this was a decent one. But I feel that they would have done more if this was Kendall's last outing. But maybe it was just meant to be anticlimactic. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But if I was a betting man, 95%, I think Kendall will be alive, even though they didn't show him in next week's teaser. If for no other reason that the characters are just kind of going on with things and they don't seem that upset. So I tend to think Kendall will be back, but we'll see. But otherwise, this episode, I had been theorizing that Shiv might go over to Kendall at the end of the season, but it seems like she's back to trying to take down her ascendant brother Roman and take back her place in the spotlight. Once Roman's gone, she argues, it'll only be her left. So to me, she still just can't break free from her desire for the power. She still wants to be part of that life, part of that circle. So to me, I don't think she's actually going to break away. I do think that the final act is going to be Tom realizing, as Kendall told him in a previous episode, the only way he can make Shiv think that he's worthy of her love, at least in his mind, is that he needs to go over to Kendall and oppose her desires, oppose Logan, and prove that he's his own man. And I think that's really the only way that you'll have this conflict between Kendall and Logan continue. Otherwise, I think it's going to end up being kind of a very much less interesting show. And I feel that they really will be leery of doing that. So to me, I think it's going to be, Tom going over, kind of a weakling, not someone you can necessarily feel that you can rely on, but giving Kendall one chance to go after his dad again, because he doesn't have the ammunition to do it right now, and he needs more. And I think that that's going to be what's going to happen. It's going to be Greg, Kendall, and Tom versus Logan and the others. So that's what I think will happen after this conversation where Shiv, after their, that night where she, as part of their foreplay, said, "You're not worthy of me. I don't love you." I think that will hit Tom hard, and that might be the impetus he needs to make this move. I think Roman this episode, oh my goodness. My wife and I were laughing so hard during the scene where he accidentally sent the picture of his genitals to Logan during the board meeting. I really didn't feel like the audience needed to see that, but it definitely left me with a sick feeling. I think maybe it would have been easy to sweep what he's doing under the rug as not a big deal if we didn't realize that he's in this position where Jerry really doesn't have the power to tell him not to. She's politely asked him not to. And at this point, he's insisting on doing it anyway. Maybe he thinks that she secretly wants it. Maybe he knows better, and it's just, he enjoys knowing that she doesn't like it. In either case, I think, there's an argument to be made. Maybe the audience needed to see the full ickiness of it. I don't think that they needed to go there personally, but this is HBO, so you kind of have to expect that sort of thing. But my wife and I were just laughing at the scene between Logan and Roman afterwards. The acting from both of the actors was just really, really good at conveying the awkwardness of the situation. Logan's severity paired with Roman's discomfiture. It was great stuff. But there was just this icky feeling, probably because of the way that they portrayed what Roman had been doing as far as Jerry was concerned, that kind of made the laughter feel a little bit hollow at times. Like, oh, this is funny, but that's not great, is it?
I'm not a radical feminist, Dad, but I think perhaps we should not fire her for receiving pictures of my...
So, you definitely see Roman as this person who's come, from the bottom and is reaching ever, higher and getting closer to his goal of actually becoming his father's favored child. And then, you see Logan second guessing it, like, oh, wait a second, are you perverted? Is this really the child that I really think I can trust? I feel, there was a lot of replayed hands this episode. I feel someone pointed out in one of the comments that this show has a cyclical style to it, and I feel like, here's another wedding episode, here's another conversation with Tom and Shiv where they're not really being frank with each other, and Tom's allowing himself, to go through the same beats. And so I think that in some sense they do need to shake things up a little bit more than they have this season so far. I think they need to get us into some new grooves, and having Tom go over to Kendall and side against Logan, that would be one way, I think, to get us there. I think they're going to have to make some more moves as well. But the battle for Logan's affections between Shiv and Roman, I'm finding that, very compelling, but I don't think it's enough. And I also don't think the idea of this merger with this Alexander Skarsgård's character, who wants to come in as an equal, I just don't buy that Logan would ever even consider this for more than a couple minutes. Like, he's never, ever been interested in modernizing his company. He's always, disputed the notion that his company needed to modernize, and he's tried to buy out TV and, other dinosaur technologies and services. So to me, that, this seems like an about face for him. It feels like the writers aren't being consistent wholly. But I'm not, what I'm saying is I think Kendall still has to be in the show, because I don't think that this is enough. I don't think that these plot lines are enough to hold the audience's interest if there's not that overarching threat that Kendall could make the whole House of Cards come crashing down through his efforts to, hold Logan accountable. I think that needs to be part of the story, or this show will lose a lot of its appeal. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please let me know if you think Kendall is dead, if you have examples of foreshadowing that would indicate that is the case. If you would be interested in continuing to watch the show if Kendall actually were dead. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of Succession and other shows, please consider subscribing to the channel. As always, thank you for watching.